"Open the safe and $87 million will be yours," laughed the Mafia boss, but the poor black boy surprised him. "Before we continue, comment which country you're watching from." The vault door glowed like a challenge. $87 million in cash sat behind it. And the most dangerous man in Los Angeles couldn't touch a single dollar. Blake Alexander stood with his arms crossed, jaw tight, watching his so-called experts fail for the fourth straight hour. 4 men in tailored suits, equipment worth more than most houses. And nothing. The electronic lock pulsed its golden light like it was laughing at him. But here's what Blake didn't know yet. 3 floors below, his soldiers were dragging a boy through the service corridors. An 11-year-old in torn clothes, barefoot, starving, caught stealing bread from the kitchen. They brought him upstairs as a joke, a piece of street trash to entertain the boss while the real men worked. They had no idea what they were carrying into that room. Leo hadn't eaten in 3 days. His stomach had stopped growling yesterday. Now it just ached. A dull, constant reminder that the world didn't care whether he lived or died. 11 years old. 6 of those spent on the streets of downtown LA. No parents, no home, no name anyone remembered. But Leo had something nobody in that penthouse had ever seen before. He could see patterns, not just numbers. Everything. The rhythm of subway doors, the timing of security cameras, the micro-expressions on a stranger's face right before they reached for their wallet or their weapon. It wasn't magic, it was survival. When you're invisible, you learn to watch. And when you watch long enough, the world starts showing you its secrets. The soldiers threw him onto the marble floor. Leo didn't cry. He didn't beg. He looked up, and his eyes went straight past the guns, past the angry men, past even the Mafia boss glaring down at him. His eyes locked onto the vault. Specifically, onto the numbers cycling across its display. And something in his brain clicked. "Those numbers are wrong." "What do we have here?" Blake's voice was ice wrapped in silk. Marco, his lieutenant, smirked. "Caught this rat in the kitchen, boss. Thought you could use a laugh while we figure out the vault situation." The other men chuckled. One of them pointed at Leo's bare feet. Another made a comment about the smell. Leo said nothing. His eyes stayed on the vault. Blake noticed. "Hey." Blake snapped his fingers. "I'm talking to you, boy. You got a death wish? Look at me when I'm speaking." Leo's gaze shifted to Blake, but only for a second, then back to the vault. "The pattern's broken," Leo whispered. The room went quiet. Blake stepped closer, his $15,000 suit catching the light, neck tattoo visible, gold Rolex glinting. Every inch of him screamed power, the kind built on blood and fear. "What did you just say?" Leo swallowed hard. His voice came out stronger this time. "The numbers on your vault. They're cycling every 7 seconds, but there's a stutter on the 7th rotation. The system's stuck in a loop." Dead silence. Then Marco burst out laughing. "You hear this? Street Rat thinks he's a tech genius." The other men joined in, pointing, mocking. But Blake didn't laugh. He stared at Leo the way a predator stares at something it doesn't understand yet. Something that might be prey, or might be something else entirely. "You know what's in that vault, boy?" Leo shook his head. $87 million. Blake let the number hang in the air. "And if it doesn't open in the next 2 hours, people are going to die. A lot of people. Starting with everyone in this room." He crouched down to Leo's level, close enough that Leo could smell the cologne, expensive, suffocating. "So here's what's going to happen." A cruel smile spread across Blake's face. "You think you're smart? You think you see something my million-dollar experts missed?" Blake stood up and spread his arms wide, playing to his men. "Open the safe, little man, and the $87 million is yours." The room erupted in laughter. Marco doubled over. The experts exchanged amused glances, but Leo didn't flinch. He looked at the vault, then back at Blake. Okay. The laughter stopped. None of them knew it yet. But in the next 45 minutes, everything they believed about power, intelligence, and who deserves to be seen was about to be shattered by a barefoot boy who had never set foot in a classroom. If you want to see what Leo does next, stick around. It gets crazy. And if you love stories where the underdog flips the whole game upside down, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming. 4 hours earlier, the penthouse had been quiet, controlled, the way Blake Alexander liked it. Now it was a war room. The vault sat in the center of Blake's private office, like a throne that had turned against its king. 8 feet of reinforced steel, biometric sensors, adaptive AI security, a custom Richter Königsberg model that had cost more than most people's houses, designed to be unbreakable, untouchable, unstoppable. And for the past 4 hours, it had been winning. The golden lights around its circular door pulsed in a slow, rhythmic pattern. Siege mode, the vault's way of saying, I don't trust anyone, not even you. Blake stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, his back to the room, watching Los Angeles stretch out beneath him like a kingdom he was about to lose. His reflection stared back, blonde hair slicked tight, jaw clenched, the snake tattoo on his neck coiling up toward his ear. He looked calm. He wasn't. Behind him, chaos. 3 of the best safecrackers money could buy had each taken their shot. The first was a former CIA tech specialist who'd bypassed embassy vaults in 6 countries. He lasted 90 minutes before admitting defeat. The second was a Russian who'd once cracked a Moscow oligarch's panic room while the man slept inside. He made it 2 hours before his equipment started smoking. The third, a German named Reinhardt, who spoke 4 languages and claimed to have never met a lock he couldn't seduce, was currently packing up his gear in humiliated silence. Their equipment littered the marble floor. Cables, laptops, thermal sensors, a small fortune in technology, now nothing more than expensive garbage. Boss? Marco's voice cut through the tension. Blake didn't turn around. What? I just got off the phone with Calabresi's people. Now Blake turned. Slowly. The kind of slow that made men nervous. Marco was his most loyal lieutenant. 30 years at Blake's side. He'd killed for Blake. Nearly died for him twice. And right now, he looked like a man delivering a death sentence. They're not extending the deadline, Marco said. Midnight? That's it. The $87 million hits their account by midnight, or what? Blake's voice was soft. Dangerous. Marco hesitated. Or they consider it an act of war. Their words. They'll hit the distribution network first, then the clubs, then... He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Blake had spent 30 years building his empire. Every drug route from Tijuana to Seattle, every judge on his payroll, every politician who owed him favors, every body buried in the desert that kept the others in line. And now, because of a power surge, a glitch, it could all burn in a single night. The Calabresi family wasn't like the others. They were old money, old blood, the kind of family that didn't make threats they couldn't keep. If Blake defaulted on this payment, they wouldn't just retaliate. They'd erase him, his operation, his name, his legacy, everything. How much time? Blake asked. Marco checked his watch. 4 hours, maybe a little less. 4 hours to crack a vault that 3 world-class experts couldn't touch. 4 hours before a war that would paint Los Angeles red. Blake turned back to the window. His city glittered below, oblivious. Millions of people going about their lives, not knowing that the balance of power was about to shift. Violently. Get me someone else, Blake said quietly. Boss, there is no one else. Everyone who's anyone in this game, we've called them. Reinhardt was supposed to be the best. Then find someone who isn't anyone. Blake's reflection glared back at him. I don't care if you pull them off the street. Find me someone who can open that door. Marco opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. He'd seen that look before. The last man who'd questioned it was still missing 3 fingers. "I'll make some calls," Marco muttered, stepping out. The room fell silent except for the soft hum of the vault. Pulsing. Mocking. Blake walked toward it, stopped a foot away, close enough to see his own reflection in the polished steel. Distorted, warped, like a funhouse mirror version of the man he used to be. 30 years ago, he'd been nobody. A kid from the streets of East L.A. with nothing but fists and hunger. He'd clawed his way up through blood and betrayal, built something that made powerful men kneel. And now a machine was going to take it all away. He pressed his palm against the cold steel. The vault didn't respond. It didn't care who he was, what he'd done, how many lives he'd ended to stand in this room. It just kept pulsing. Gold. 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 "You're going to open," Blake whispered. "One way or another, you're going to open." The vault said nothing. But somewhere in the building, 3 floors below, fate was already in motion. A boy with no shoes and no name was being dragged through a service corridor, caught with stolen bread, about to be hauled upstairs as entertainment for a frustrated crime lord. A boy whose mind saw patterns the way other people saw colors. A boy who was about to walk into a room full of killers and change everything. Blake didn't know it yet, but the answer to his impossible problem wasn't coming from the underworld's best safecrackers. It was coming from the streets he'd forgotten. Leo didn't remember his mother's face anymore. He remembered her voice. Soft, tired, singing him to sleep in a language he couldn't name. He remembered the smell of her hair. Something like coconut and cigarette smoke. He remembered the way her hands felt when she held his face and told him he was special. But her face? Gone. Erased by time and trauma and the kind of grief a 5-year-old doesn't know how to carry. She died on a Tuesday. Overdose. Leo found her on the kitchen floor when he came home from kindergarten. He didn't understand what dead meant. He just knew she wouldn't wake up, no matter how hard he shook her. The police came. Then the social workers. Then the first foster home. And that's when Leo learned the most important lesson of his life. Nobody was coming to save him. The foster system wasn't designed for kids like Leo. It was designed for babies. Cute, quiet, easy to place. Not for a black boy with too many questions and eyes that saw too much. Not for a kid who flinched when men raised their voices and asked uncomfortable things like, "Why and when can I go home?" Home. What a joke. His first placement lasted 3 months. The Hendersons. Nice enough, until Mr. Henderson started drinking and Mrs. Henderson started pretending not to notice the bruises. Leo learned to sleep with one eye open. Learned which floorboards creaked when you needed to escape to the bathroom at 2 a.m. Second placement, the group home. 14 kids. Not enough beds. The older boys ran the place like a prison yard. Leo was small, so he became a target. He learned to hide food under his mattress. Learned to fight dirty when he had to. Learned that crying only made things worse. Third placement, the Martins. They seemed kind. Went to church on Sundays. Called him son. For 6 months, Leo let himself believe it might work. Then Mrs. Martin got pregnant with her own baby, and suddenly there wasn't room for a foster kid anymore. "It's not personal," the social worker said when she picked him up. "Sometimes these things just don't work out." Leo was 9 years old. He'd already figured out that not personal meant you don't matter. That night, he ran. The streets of downtown L.A. weren't kind, but they were honest. Nobody pretended to care about you. Nobody promised things they wouldn't deliver. The streets just were. Cold, hungry, dangerous, and if you couldn't adapt, you disappeared. Leo adapted. He found the other invisible kids first, the runaways, the throwaways, the ones society had crumpled up and tossed aside, They taught him things no school ever would. How to spot an undercover cop by the way they walked. How to find the restaurants that threw out food at exactly 10 p.m. How to ride the subway all night when it was too cold to sleep outside. How to pick a pocket without the mark ever feeling a thing. That last skill took practice, weeks of getting caught, getting chased, getting beaten. But Leo was patient. And more importantly, Leo could see things other people couldn't. Patterns. It started small. He noticed that tourists always checked their back pockets after passing someone suspicious, which meant you had to look unsuspicious. He noticed that people on their phones were easier marks than people with headphones. He noticed that the third subway car was always less crowded than the first, but the seventh car was where the transit cops liked to stand. His brain cataloged everything, filed it away, cross-referenced it without him even trying. By 10 years old, Leo could walk through a crowd and tell you within seconds who was carrying cash, who was distracted, who was dangerous, and who would chase versus who would just yell. He didn't know the word for what he was. Didn't know that psychologists would call it hypervigilant pattern recognition, a survival mechanism that trauma sometimes gifted to children who had to grow up too fast. He just knew that the world made sense when you watched it closely enough. Numbers were the clearest. Leo couldn't do algebra, couldn't tell you what a quadratic equation was. School had given up on him long before he gave up on it. But numbers in the real world? Those he understood. The timing of traffic lights, the rotation of security cameras, the intervals between a store clerk's glances toward the door. It was all rhythm, all pattern, all predictable, if you paid attention. One night, Leo watched an ATM for 3 hours, not to rob it, just to understand it. By the end, he could predict the exact second the screen would refresh, the precise pattern of the keypad tones, the rhythm of the receipt printer. It was beautiful, like music nobody else could hear. The other street kids thought he was weird. "Why you always staring at stuff?" they'd ask. Leo never had an answer that made sense. How do you explain that the world speaks to you in numbers? That chaos has a shape if you look long enough? You don't. You just stay quiet, stay invisible, stay alive. That was Leo's life. 11 years old, 6 years on the streets, no family, no future, no name worth remembering. Just a ghost in a city of angels, surviving one day at a time. He had no idea that today would be different. No idea that a stolen loaf of bread would lead him into a penthouse full of killers. No idea that his gift, the one nobody had ever cared about, was about to be worth $87 million. But that's the thing about invisible kids. Sometimes, the world doesn't see them coming until it's too late. The bread was still warm when they caught him. Leo had been watching the Alexander Towers loading dock for 2 days, learning the patterns. The delivery trucks came at 7 a.m. and 4 p.m. The security guard took a smoke break at 4:15, exactly 12 minutes every single time. The service door had a 3-second delay before the magnetic lock re-engaged. 3 seconds. That was all Leo needed. He slipped through like a shadow, down the service corridor, past the laundry rooms, into the basement kitchen where the executive catering staff prepared meals for people who'd never know hunger. The smell almost broke him. Fresh bread, roasted meat, something with garlic and butter that made his empty stomach scream. Leo hadn't eaten in 3 days. His hands were shaking. His vision kept going fuzzy at the edges. Just one loaf. They won't even notice. He was wrong. The cook noticed. A big man with tattooed forearms who definitely wasn't just a cook. He grabbed Leo by the collar before the boy could even reach the door. "What do we have here?" Leo struggled, kicked, bit. But he was 11 years old and malnourished, and the man held him like he weighed nothing. Within minutes, 2 more men appeared. Soldiers. Leo could tell by their eyes, flat, cold, the kind of eyes that had seen things and stopped caring. They looked at him the way people looked at rats. "Little thief," one of them said. "You picked the wrong building, kid." Leo expected to be thrown out, maybe beaten first. That was usually how it went. Instead, The soldier smiled, and that smile was worse than any fist. "Boss is in a mood upstairs. Might appreciate some entertainment." The elevator ride felt like ascending to hell. Leo's bare feet left dirty prints on the polished floor. His torn shirt hung off one shoulder. He could see his reflection in the mirrored walls. Small, pathetic, trembling. But he wasn't trembling from fear. He was trembling from hunger, from exhaustion, from the adrenaline that wouldn't stop flooding his veins. His mind, though? His mind was calm. Already working. 58th floor. 4 men in suits in the lobby downstairs. 2 more in this elevator. Expensive building. Expensive security. These aren't businessmen. Leo had survived 6 years on the streets by reading people, and these men had dangerous written in every line of their bodies. Mafia. Has to be, which means whatever's upstairs. The elevator dinged, the doors opened, and Leo stepped into a world he'd never imagined. The penthouse was massive. White marble floors so polished they reflected the ceiling. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing all of Los Angeles like a painting. Furniture that probably cost more than every meal Leo had eaten in his entire life combined. But Leo barely noticed any of it. His eyes went straight to the vault. It sat in the center of the room like an altar, 8 feet of gleaming steel. A circular door ringed with golden lights that pulsed in a slow, hypnotic rhythm. Numbers scrolled across a digital display embedded in its face, and surrounding it, chaos, equipment everywhere, laptops, cables, tools Leo didn't recognize, men in expensive suits arguing, pacing, sweating through their collars. And at the window, his back to the room, stood a man who radiated power like heat from a furnace. Blake Alexander. Leo didn't know his name, didn't need to. He knew what power looked like. He'd spent his whole life avoiding men like this, men who could end you with a word and never lose a minute of sleep. "Boss." The soldier shoved Leo forward. "Found this rat in the kitchen. Thought you could use a laugh." Blake turned. For a moment, nothing happened. The Mafia boss just looked at Leo. Really looked, the way a predator examines something that wandered into its territory, taking in the torn clothes, the bare feet, the ribs visible through the ragged shirt. Then he smiled. But it wasn't a kind smile. "A thief." Blake's voice was silk wrapped around a blade. "In my building, on today of all days." He walked closer. Slow, deliberate, each step echoing on the marble like a countdown. "Do you know what happens to people who steal from me, boy?" Leo should have answered, should have begged, should have done something. But he couldn't, because his eyes weren't on Blake anymore. They were locked on the vault, on the numbers cycling across its display, on the pattern that everyone else in the room had missed. 7, 7, 7. Stutter. 7, 7, 7. Stutter. There it was. Clear as day. The sequence should have been smooth, continuous, but every 7th cycle there was a hesitation, a microsecond delay, like a heartbeat skipping. The system's stuck. It's looping. That's why they can't open it. "Hey!" Blake snapped his fingers inches from Leo's face. "I'm talking to you. You deaf or just stupid?" Leo flinched. His eyes finally moved to Blake, but only for a second. "The numbers," Leo whispered. Blake frowned. "What?" Leo's voice was barely audible, shaking, but he couldn't stop the words from coming. "The numbers on your vault. They're cycling wrong." The room went dead silent. Every head turned. The experts, the soldiers. Marco, Blake's lieutenant, stepped forward with murder in his eyes. "What did you just say?" Blake's voice had dropped to something dangerous. Leo swallowed hard. His survival instincts screamed at him to shut up, to disappear, to become invisible like he always did. But something stronger pushed back. The pattern, The answer. It was right there, and nobody could see it but him. "The pattern's broken," Leo said, louder this time. His voice still trembled, but the words were clear. "At the 7th position, every 7th cycle there's a stutter. The system thinks it's protecting itself, but it's actually stuck in a loop. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved." Then Blake Alexander did something nobody expected. He laughed! The laughter hit Leo like a physical force. It started with Marco, a sharp, barking sound that echoed off the marble walls. Then the soldiers joined in. Then the experts, relieved to have something to mock besides their own failures. Within seconds, the entire penthouse was howling. "You hear this?" Marco stepped forward, pointing at Leo like he was a circus animal. "This street rat thinks he can crack a Richter Königsberg?" More laughter. Someone slapped their knee. Someone else wiped tears from their eyes. Marco circled Leo slowly, playing to the crowd. "Look at him. No shoes. Smells like a dumpster. Probably can't even spell his own name." He leaned in close, his breath hot against Leo's ear. "And he thinks he sees something our million-dollar experts missed?" Leo didn't respond, didn't move, didn't even blink. He'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made things worse. When the older boys at the group home wanted to hurt you, they wanted you to cry first. When the cops hassled you on the street, they wanted you to run so they had an excuse. The trick was to become stone, to disappear inside yourself until the storm passed. But this time, something was different. This time Leo wasn't trying to survive. He was trying to be heard, and that terrified him more than any fist ever could. Blake wasn't laughing. He stood apart from his men, arms crossed, watching Leo with an expression that was impossible to read. Not amused, not angry, something else. Curious. In 30 years of running the most dangerous criminal empire on the West Coast, Blake had learned to read people. It was how he'd survived, knowing who would betray him before they knew it themselves, knowing which politicians could be bought and which ones needed to be buried. And right now, something about this boy wasn't adding up. A street kid caught stealing bread should be terrified, crying, begging for mercy. This one was staring at the vault like it owed him money. Blake raised a hand. The laughter stopped instantly, like someone had hit a mute button. His men knew that gesture. It meant shut up or suffer. "Everyone, quiet." The silence was immediate. Absolute. Blake walked toward Leo. Slow, deliberate steps that echoed through the penthouse, like a judge approaching the bench. He stopped directly in front of the boy, close enough to see the dirt on his face and the hunger hollowing out his cheeks. Then he crouched down, eye to eye. Predator to prey. "Say that again," Blake said softly. "What you said about the numbers." Leo's throat was dry. His heart hammered so hard he was sure Blake could hear it. Every instinct screamed at him to take it back, to say he was wrong, to beg forgiveness and pray they'd just throw him out. But the pattern was still there, pulsing on the vault's display. Wrong. Broken. Obvious, if you knew how to look. "The 7th cycle," Leo said. His voice cracked, but he pushed through. "Every 7th rotation, there's a delay, like a stutter. The system's supposed to be smooth, but it's not. It's stuck in a verification loop." Blake's eyes narrowed. "And how would a homeless child know anything about security systems?" "I don't know about security systems." Leo swallowed hard. "I know about patterns. Everything has one. If you watch long enough, you can see when something's broken." For a long moment, Blake just stared at him. The men shifted uncomfortably. Marco's hand drifted toward his gun. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Then Blake did something that surprised everyone. He smiled. Not a cruel smile. Not a mocking one. Something stranger. Something almost like respect? No, that couldn't be right. Blake Alexander didn't respect anyone. "You've got guts, kid. I'll give you that." Blake stood up slowly, brushing off his $15,000 suit like the conversation had dirtied it. He turned to face his men, spreading his arms wide. 4 hours, gentlemen. 4 hours we've been standing here with our thumbs up our asses, while the best safecrackers money can buy tell me it can't be done. He gestured toward Leo without looking at him. And now a starving 11-year-old walks in and claims he can see the problem. Marco scoffed. Boss, you can't seriously— Did I ask for your opinion, Marco? Marco's mouth snapped shut. Blake turned back to Leo. That strange smile was still there, but now it had an edge to it. The kind of edge that could cut. Here's what's going to happen, little man. Blake's voice carried through the penthouse like a verdict. You say you can see what's wrong with my vault? Fine, prove it. He stepped closer. Close enough that Leo could smell the cologne. Expensive, suffocating, wrong. Open that safe. Leo's blood went cold. I didn't say I could open it. I just said, I don't care what you said. Blake cut him off. You walked into my building, stole my food, interrupted my crisis, and now you're telling me my experts are wrong? He crouched down again. This time there was no curiosity in his eyes, only the cold calculation of a man who had killed for less. Open the safe, little man. Blake's smile widened. And the $87 million inside? It's yours. The room went dead silent. Leo's mind raced. This was insane. This was impossible. This was— Every single dollar. Blake stood up, adjusting his cuffs like he'd just made a routine business deal. He turned to his men with a smirk. You heard me. The kid cracks the vault, the money's his. He chuckled, shaking his head. Hell, it's not like any of you are getting it open. The men exchanged glances. Marco looked ready to explode. But Blake was already walking away, snapping his fingers over his shoulder. Get him a chair. The chair was leather. Italian. Probably cost more than every piece of furniture in every foster home Leo had ever lived in, combined. He didn't sit in it. Instead, Leo walked toward the vault like it was calling him. His bare feet left faint prints on the marble, and he could feel every eye in the room burning into his back. Watching. Waiting. Hoping he'd fail so they could get back to mocking him. But Leo wasn't thinking about them anymore. He was thinking about the numbers. The vault's display glowed soft blue, cycling through what looked like random sequences. To anyone else, it was gibberish, meaningless digits scrolling in an endless loop, the kind of thing your eyes slide right past. Leo's eyes didn't slide past anything. He stopped 3 feet from the interface and just watched, not touching, not speaking, just letting the pattern reveal itself. 7 cycles. Pause. 7 cycles. Pause. 7 cycles. Pause. There it was. Consistent. Predictable. Wrong. Well? Marco's voice cut through the silence like a knife. We waiting for the street rat to have a vision? Scattered laughter, but quieter than before. Uncertain. Leo ignored it. He stepped closer to the display, tilting his head slightly, tracking the numbers like a hawk tracking prey. Can I have a piece of paper? He asked, and something to write with. More laughter. Someone muttered something about teaching a homeless kid to read first. But Blake nodded to one of his men. 30 seconds later, Leo had a pen and a sheet of expensive letterhead. He started writing. The numbers came fast. Leo's hand moved across the paper in quick, sharp strokes. Not elegant, but precise. He wasn't doing math, not really. He was transcribing, recording what he saw so he could show them what they'd missed. After 2 minutes, he stopped. Here. He held up the paper. Look at this. The sheet was covered in numbers, grouped into clusters of 7, but every 7th cluster had a small mark next to it, a dash Leo had added. The biometric rotation runs on a 7-cycle sequence, Leo said. His voice was steadier now. The pattern had grounded him. Each cycle is supposed to flow into the next, seamless, like breathing, he pointed to the marks. But every 7th cycle there's a stutter, a delay, maybe a 1/10 of a second. You can't see it unless you're counting in your head. But it's there. Silence. Then Dr. Reinhardt stepped forward. The German safecracker was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of condescending smile that academics wore like armor. He'd cracked vaults in 12 countries, written papers on electronic security systems, consulted for governments and corporations worth billions, and he was not about to be shown up by a child in torn clothes. "This is ridiculous," Reinhardt said, his accent thick with disdain. "The Richter-Königsberg system does not stutter. It is the most advanced biometric platform in the world. I have studied its architecture for 15 years. He snatched the paper from Leo's hands, glancing at it dismissively. "This is nothing. Random numbers written by a boy who does not even understand that he is looking at." He crumpled the paper and tossed it aside. "A lucky guesser, nothing more." The other experts nodded. Relieved. It was easier to believe the kid was wrong than to admit they'd missed something obvious. Marco grinned. "Told you, boss. Waste of time." Leo felt the familiar weight of invisibility pressing down on him, the feeling of being dismissed, overlooked, erased. They don't see it. They don't want to see it. But then he noticed something. Blake wasn't laughing. The Mafia boss stood apart from his men, arms crossed, watching Leo with an intensity that made the boy's skin prickle. He wasn't looking at the paper or the vault or the experts. He was looking at Leo's hands. Leo glanced down, confused. His hands were just hands. Dirty. Small. Calloused from years of climbing fences and prying open dumpsters. But they weren't shaking. In a room full of killers, with $87 million on the line and his life probably hanging in the balance, Leo's hands were perfectly still. Steady as stone. Blake had seen hands like that before. In the mirror. 30 years ago, when he'd been just another street kid with nothing to lose, Blake had learned the same lesson Leo had learned. Fear was useless. It didn't protect you. Didn't save you. All it did was slow you down. The ones who survived, the ones who won, were the ones who learned to turn it off. This boy had turned it off. "Reinhardt," Blake said quietly. The German turned, still wearing that smug smile. "Yes, Herr Alexander." "You said the system doesn't stutter." "Correct. It is impossible." "Then explain to me why a kid who's never seen a Richter-Königsberg in his life can identify a pattern that you, with 15 years of experience, can't see." Reinhardt's smile faltered. The boy is simply mistaken. He does not understand." "I didn't ask what he understands." Blake's voice dropped to something dangerous. "I asked what you understand, because right now, I'm looking at a man who's charged me $500,000 to tell me my vault can't be opened, and I'm looking at a boy who's telling me he knows why." He stepped closer to Reinhardt, close enough to make the German flinch. "So here's what's going to happen. The boy gets his chance. If he's wrong, we throw him out with the garbage. But if he's right..." Blake turned to look at Leo. That strange, evaluating gaze again, like he was seeing something no one else could. "If he's right, then you and your team can explain to me why you missed what a starving 11-year-old caught in 60 seconds. Reinhardt's face went pale. Blake gestured toward the vault. "Go ahead, kid. Show them what you see." Leo took a breath, steadied himself, and walked toward the machine that was about to change everything. Leo stood before the vault, like David facing Goliath. Except David had a slingshot. Leo had nothing but his mind, and a pattern nobody else could see. The experts watched with barely concealed amusement. Marco had his arms crossed, a smirk playing at his lips. Even Blake, despite his earlier defense, seemed to be waiting for the inevitable failure. But Leo wasn't thinking about them. He was thinking about the vault, not how to crack it. That was the wrong question. Everyone in this room had been asking the wrong question for 4 hours. You don't beat a system by fighting it. You beat it by making it fight itself. Leo had learned that lesson in a dozen foster homes. When the bigger kids wanted your food, you didn't try to stop them. You made them think the food was spoiled. When the cops were chasing you, you didn't try to outrun them. You made them chase someone else. The vault wasn't his enemy. It was a machine following rules. And every rule had a loophole. "I need a glass of water," Leo said. The room went quiet. Marco snorted. "What? You thirsty? Want us to get you a sandwich too while we're at it?" "A glass of water," Leo repeated, not looking away from the vault. "Please." Blake raised an eyebrow but nodded to one of his men. A minute later, Leo held a crystal glass filled with ice water, probably worth more than any cup he'd ever drunk from. He didn't drink it. Instead, he walked slowly around the vault space, studying the floor. His eyes traced the edges where steel met marble until he found what he was looking for. A thin seam, almost invisible. The kind of gap where sensors lived. Environmental monitoring. The vault protects itself from more than just thieves. Leo knelt down, positioned the glass carefully, and tipped it over. Water splashed across the marble, spreading in a thin puddle that crept toward the vault's base. "What the hell are you doing?" Marco lunged forward, but Blake's hand stopped him. "Let him work." The water touched the seam. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft beep from the vault's display. A new indicator appeared. A small blue icon Leo didn't recognize, but he understood its meaning. Moisture detected. Potential flood risk. The vault's AI had registered a threat, not a security threat, an environmental one. One down. "Turn off the lights," Leo said. Now even Blake looked uncertain. "Excuse me?" "The overhead lights, all of them. Turn them off." Reinhardt laughed, a harsh, condescending sound. "This is absurd. The boy is playing games. He has no idea what he is doing." "Maybe." Leo finally turned to face the room. His voice was calm, steady. "Or maybe your fancy degrees taught you how the vault is supposed to work. Nobody taught you what happens when it's confused." Something flickered in Blake's eyes. That same look from before, the one that saw something nobody else could. "Kill the lights," Blake ordered. "Boss," Marco started. "Did I stutter?" The lights went off. The penthouse plunged into darkness, broken only by the soft glow of the Los Angeles skyline through the windows and the pulsing golden light of the vault itself. Leo watched the display. Another beep. Another icon. This one amber. The vault had registered the sudden darkness as potential power instability. A brownout, a grid failure. 2 threats now. Environmental damage and power disruption. The AI was getting nervous. "Now I need it cold," Leo said. "As cold as you can make it. Crank the AC all the way down." "You're insane," one of the experts muttered. But he was watching now. Really watching. They all were. Blake didn't hesitate. He nodded to Marco, who grudgingly walked to a control panel on the wall. 30 seconds later, freezing air began pouring from the vents. Leo waited. The temperature dropped. 60 degrees. 55. 50. The vault beeped again. A third icon appeared on the display. Red this time. Temperature anomaly. Potential environmental hazard. Leo could almost feel the AI's confusion. It was a machine designed to protect its contents at all costs. Siege mode meant keeping everything locked down, trusting no one, waiting for proper authorization. But now it was facing something siege mode wasn't built for. What happens when the thing threatening the contents isn't a thief, but the environment itself? What happens when staying locked is more dangerous than opening? You're not trying to crack it, Blake said slowly. You're trying to scare it. Leo nodded, not taking his eyes off the display. The vault's AI has priorities. Number 1, protect the contents. Number 2, maintain security protocols. But what happens when those two priorities conflict? He pointed at the icons on the screen. Moisture, power instability, temperature drop. Right now the system thinks it's in danger, not from a break-in, from a disaster, flood, power failure, freezing conditions that could damage whatever's inside. Reinhardt's face had gone pale. That is not how security systems work. That's exactly how they work, Leo said quietly. The safe doesn't care about the money, it cares about protecting what's inside. And right now it's starting to believe that the safest thing to do is open. The vault's golden lights flickered. For the first time in 4 hours, the rhythm changed. The pulsing slowed. The hum deepened. Something mechanical groaned within the steel walls, the sound of gears that hadn't moved in hours beginning to shift. Impossible, Reinhardt whispered. Marco stepped back like the vault had become a wild animal. Even Blake's composure cracked, just for a second, just enough for Leo to see the shock beneath the mask. But Leo didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't relax, because he wasn't done yet. The vault was confused, scared even, if a machine could feel fear. But it hadn't surrendered. The siege protocol was still fighting, still trying to maintain control. Leo needed one more push, one final move to tip the scales, and he knew exactly what it was. I need everyone to back away from the vault, he said. Now. Nobody moved. I said now. Something in his voice, a certainty that didn't belong to an 11-year-old, made them listen. The men retreated. Blake stepped back, his eyes never leaving Leo. And Leo turned to face the machine that was about to make him a millionaire. Or get him killed. Okay, he whispered to the vault. Let's finish this. The vault was at war with itself. Leo could see it in the display. 3 warning icons flashing in an erratic rhythm, each one screaming a different threat. Moisture, power, temperature. The AI's priorities were colliding, crashing into each other like waves against rocks. But Siege Protocol held firm. The lock remained engaged. The golden lights kept pulsing their stubborn amber glow. It's not enough. The system is scared, but it's not convinced. Leo's mind raced. He'd pushed the vault to the edge of confusion, but edges weren't enough. He needed to push it over. The problem was simple. The AI had 2 directives that couldn't coexist. Directive 1, protect the contents at all costs. Directive 2, maintain siege protocol until proper authorization. Right now, both directives were still technically possible. The vault believed it could wait out the environmental threats. Believed that staying locked was still the safer choice. Leo needed to change that belief. He needed to make the vault understand that staying locked wasn't just risky. It was destruction. I need heat, Leo said suddenly. Something hot. Really hot. Marco laughed bitterly from across the room. First cold, now hot? Make up your mind, street rat. But Blake was already moving. He grabbed a silver lighter from his pocket. Expensive, engraved, the kind that cost more than most people's cars, and tossed it to Leo. Leo caught it without looking. His eyes never left the vault. Fire, the ultimate environmental threat. He flicked the lighter. A small flame danced to life, casting orange shadows across the steel door. Then he held it close to the vault's base sensors, close enough for the heat signature to register, close enough to make the AI panic. The display exploded with activity. A new icon appeared, red, urgent, pulsing faster than the others. Fire warning, potential catastrophic damage. The vault's internal temperature monitors were going haywire, trying to reconcile the freezing air with the localized heat source. Come on, Come on, see what I'm showing you. The vault groaned, a deep, mechanical sound that vibrated through the floor. The golden lights flickered wildly. Amber, amber, amber. Then nothing. The lights went dark. What happened? Someone whispered. Did it break? Leo didn't answer. He was counting in his head, watching the blank display, waiting. 3, 2, 1. The screen flashed back to life. But something was different now. The warning icons were gone. In their place, a single message scrolled across the display in stark white letters. Environmental integrity compromised, contents at risk, emergency protocol initiated. Leo exhaled slowly. There it is. The vault had finally understood. Staying locked wasn't protecting anything. It was guaranteeing destruction. The AI had done the math, weighed the probabilities, and reached the only logical conclusion. But Siege Protocol was still fighting. Leo could see it in the way the display flickered, the way the system hesitated. 2 programs battling for control inside a machine that wasn't designed for contradiction. It needed one more push, one final input to tip the scales. Leo leaned close to the display, close enough that his breath fogged the surface. You can't protect what you destroy, he whispered. Then he reached out and touched the screen. His fingers found the input panel, a small touchpad beneath the main display that the experts had been using to enter their bypass codes. Leo didn't enter a code. He didn't know any codes. Instead, he entered a sequence. 7 numbers. The same 7 numbers that had been cycling on the display all along, but in reverse order. The pattern isn't broken. It's backwards. The system is trying to verify itself, but it's reading its own code in the wrong direction. It was a guess. A desperate, insane guess based on nothing but instinct and pattern recognition. But Leo had survived 11 years on guesses like this. He pressed enter. For one horrible second, nothing happened. The room held its breath. Marco's hand drifted toward his gun. Reinhardt looked ready to faint. Even Blake had gone still, frozen in that predatory way of his, waiting to see which way the moment would break. Then the vault screamed. Not literally, but that's what it sounded like. A deep, grinding roar of metal and machinery, gears turning for the first time in hours, locks disengaging in a cascade of mechanical thunder. The golden lights blazed to life. Amber, amber, green. The vault door swung open, slowly, majestically, like a giant waking from a long sleep. And behind it, Leo had never seen that much money in his life. Stacks of cash, floor to ceiling, bundled hundreds, organized in neat rows, glowing under the vault's internal lights like some kind of treasure from a fairy tale. $87 million. More money than Leo could comprehend. More than everyone he'd ever known would earn in 100 lifetimes combined. The room was silent. Not just quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that happens when reality breaks and nobody knows how to react. Marco's jaw hung open. The experts looked like they'd seen a ghost. Reinhardt had actually stumbled backward, catching himself on a chair. And Blake was staring at Leo. Not at the money. Not at the vault. At Leo. His expression was impossible to read. Shock, maybe. Disbelief. Something deeper that Leo couldn't name. Leo stared back. For the first time since this nightmare began, neither of them was laughing. Neither of them was performing. It was just a man and a boy, standing on opposite sides of an impossible moment. You actually did it, Blake said quietly. His voice was strange, almost soft. You actually opened it. Leo didn't trust himself to speak. His legs were shaking. His whole body was shaking. The adrenaline that had been holding him together was crashing, and he suddenly felt every one of the 3 days he hadn't eaten. But he stayed standing. He'd learned that much from the streets. Never let them see you fall. Blake took a step toward the vault, toward the money. Then he stopped and looked back at Leo. $87 million. A strange smile crossed his face. I made you a promise, kid. The words hung in the air. Leo's heart stopped. He's not actually going to honor it. Nobody honors promises to kids like me. Nobody. Marco. Blake's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Get the boy a chair, a real one this time. He turned back to Leo, and that strange smile was still there. We need to talk. The silence lasted exactly 4 seconds. Then Marco moved. His hand went for his gun. Smooth, practiced, the motion of a man who'd drawn that weapon 100 times before. His face was twisted with something between rage and disbelief. This is insane, he spat. We're not giving $87 million to a street rat. Boss, let me take him out back. 5 minutes. Problem solved. Leo's blood went cold. He'd known this was coming. Promises meant nothing in rooms like this. Men like Marco didn't let children walk away with fortunes. But before Marco's gun cleared the holster, Blake raised his hand. One gesture. That's all it took. Marco froze. His fingers trembled on the grip, every muscle in his body straining against the order. But he didn't draw. 30 years of loyalty held him in place like a leash. Put it away, Blake said quietly. Boss. Did I stutter, Marco? The words were soft, almost gentle, and somehow that made them more terrifying than any shout. Marco's jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth, but his hand fell away from the gun. Blake stepped forward, closing the distance between himself and Leo. Each footstep echoed through the penthouse like a countdown. Leo forced himself not to retreat, not to flinch, not to show the terror clawing at his chest. Don't run, don't beg, don't give them the satisfaction. Blake stopped directly in front of him, close enough that Leo could see the individual threads in his $15,000 suit, close enough to smell that suffocating cologne. You know, Blake said conversationally, most grown men can't look me in the eye. They stutter, they sweat, they make excuses. He tilted his head, studying Leo like a specimen under glass. But you haven't looked away once. Leo's throat was dry as sandpaper. You promised. The words came out stronger than he expected, steadier. Blake's eyebrow rose. I did. $87 million. You said if I opened the vault, it was mine. That's what I said. So it's mine. A murmur rippled through the room. Marco made a sound like a wounded animal. The experts exchanged nervous glances, clearly wondering if they were about to witness a murder. But Blake just smiled. It wasn't his predator smile. It wasn't his cruel smile. It was something Leo had never seen before. Something that looked almost like curiosity. All right, little man. You earned it, fair and square. Blake spread his arms wide, gesturing at the open vault and its glowing stacks of cash. So tell me, what do you want? Cars? Houses? Private jets? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. You want to be rich, kid? You want to never be hungry again? Never sleep on concrete? Never have anyone look at you like you're garbage? Leo's heart hammered. Every word Blake spoke painted a picture of the life he'd dreamed about in his darkest moments. Warm beds, full meals, safety. He could take the money and disappear. Start over somewhere far away. Become someone new. Someone who'd never known the streets, never known hunger, never known what it felt like to be invisible. $87 million. It was everything, and it wasn't enough. No, Leo said. Blake blinked. For the first time all night, he looked genuinely surprised. No? I don't want your money. The room went dead silent. Even Marco stopped glaring long enough to stare in disbelief. Blake laughed, A short, sharp sound. Kid, I don't think you understand what you're turning down. 87 million. You could buy anything. Be anything. I know what I'm turning down. Then what the hell do you want? Leo took a breath. This was the moment. The one he'd been building toward without even knowing it. Every pattern he'd ever seen, every lesson the streets had taught him, it all led here. I want you to protect the kids like me. Blake's smile faltered. What? The ones nobody sees, the ones sleeping under bridges and in alleys and behind dumpsters, the ones the system threw away. Leo's voice grew stronger with each word. I want you to feed them, school them, give them a chance. He met Blake's eyes, really met them, without fear, without hesitation. You run this city. Everyone knows it. The cops, the politicians, everyone's scared of you. So use it. Use that power for something that matters. Blake stared at him for a long moment. The penthouse was so quiet, Leo could hear his own heartbeat. Then Blake laughed again. But this time it was different. Softer. Almost wondering. Let me get this straight. He shook his head slowly. You just cracked a vault that the best experts in the world couldn't touch. You're standing in front of $87 million in cash, and instead of taking it, instead of setting yourself up for life, you want me to start a charity? Not a charity, Leo said. A promise, like the one you made to me. Blake was quiet for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Something Leo couldn't read. You could have taken everything, kid. Every dollar, every cent. Leo nodded. I know. So why didn't you? The answer came without hesitation, without thought. It rose up from somewhere deep inside him, from every cold night, every empty stomach, every moment he'd felt invisible. Because I am taking everything. Blake frowned. What? Leo looked at the vault. At the money. At the men in their expensive suits who'd laughed at him, mocked him, wanted to kill him. Then he looked back at Blake. I'm taking a future. Not just for me, for all of them. Every kid out there who's invisible right now. I'm taking their future too. The words hung in the air like smoke. Blake didn't respond. He just stood there, staring at Leo like he was seeing him for the first time. Finally, he spoke. You know what, kid? His voice was strange, thick with something Leo couldn't name. I've been running this empire for 30 years, made deals with killers, politicians, kings. Never once has anyone surprised me. He stepped back, shaking his head slowly. Until tonight. Blake turned to face his men. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of command. Clear the room, everyone out. The kid and I need to talk. Marco opened his mouth to protest. Now, Marco. One by one, they filed out. The experts, the soldiers, even Marco casting one last venomous glare at Leo before the elevator doors closed. And then it was just two people, a Mafia boss and a Barefoot boy, standing at the edge of something neither of them fully understood. 10 years later, a young man in a tailored suit stood at a podium in downtown Los Angeles. The ballroom was packed, senators in the third row, tech CEOs near the windows, journalists with cameras flashing, and scattered throughout the crowd, hundreds of children, some in nice clothes, cleaned up for the occasion, others still wearing the streets on their faces, brought in just that morning from shelters and overpasses across the city. Behind the podium, a massive banner stretched across the wall. Alexander Leo Foundation, 10th anniversary. 15,000 children housed, 8,000 educated, 200 college graduates. Because every child deserves to be seen. Leo adjusted his microphone and looked out at the sea of faces. 21 years old now. Tall, confident, the kind of presence that made rooms go quiet when he walked in. But his eyes, those were the same, still watchful, still seeing patterns nobody else could. 10 years ago, he began, his voice carrying through the silent ballroom, I was dragged into a penthouse by men who thought I was garbage. A ripple went through the crowd. The journalists leaned forward. The children listened with wide eyes. I was 11 years old, barefoot, starving. I'd been caught stealing bread from a kitchen because I hadn't eaten in 3 days. Leo paused, letting the words land. The men who caught me thought I'd make good entertainment, a distraction, something to laugh at while they dealt with their real problems. His gaze drifted to the front row. Blake Alexander sat there in a charcoal suit, his blonde hair now streaked with silver, the snake tattoo on his neck faded but still visible. 72 years old. Legitimate now. Every business restructured, every dirty dollar cleaned, every criminal enterprise dissolved or transformed. He looked like a different man. But when his eyes met Leo's, something passed between them. A decade of history, of arguments and breakthroughs, of a partnership nobody had seen coming. Blake nodded once. Keep going. Leo turned back to the crowd. That night, a man made me a bet he never expected to pay. He told me if I could open his vault, a vault that the best experts in the world couldn't crack, the money inside would be mine. Leo smiled slightly. $87 million? I was 11. I didn't even know what that number meant. Soft laughter rippled through the room. But I opened it, not because I was smarter than the experts, not because I had some secret knowledge. He leaned into the microphone. I opened it because I could see something they couldn't, a pattern, a flaw, something obvious, if you knew how to look. His voice dropped, and the room leaned in with it. That's what being invisible teaches you. When nobody sees you, you learn to see everything, every detail, every rhythm, every crack in the system that's supposed to keep you out. He gestured toward the children in the audience. Every kid in this room, every kid on the streets right now, has that same gift. Not because they're special, because survival makes you special. It sharpens you, forces you to notice things comfortable people never have to see. Leo's jaw tightened. The world calls them problems, statistics, burdens on the system. His voice hardened. I call them the most resourceful, resilient, brilliant people you'll ever meet, and we're wasting them. The applause started somewhere in the middle of the room and spread like wildfire, but Leo raised his hand, and it quieted. 10 years ago, I made a choice. I could have taken the money and disappeared, started over, become someone else. He shook his head. Instead, I asked a dangerous man to do something he'd never done before. Protect the children nobody else would protect. Feed them, educate them, see them. Leo looked at Blake again. He could have killed me, probably should have, by his own logic. Instead, he said yes. Blake's expression was unreadable, but something glistened in his eyes. Something he'd never let anyone see a decade ago. Pride. Real pride. The Alexander Leo Foundation has housed 15,000 children, Leo continued, educated 8,000, sent 200 to college, built 12 community centers, hired 300 formerly homeless youth as staff and mentors. The numbers hung in the air, heavy with meaning. But here's what the numbers don't tell you. Leo's voice softened. They don't tell you about the kid who thought she was worthless until someone handed her a book and watched her devour it in a day. They don't tell you about the boy who'd never slept in a bed until he was 14, and now he's graduating from UCLA next month. His voice cracked slightly. He steadied himself. They don't tell you that every single one of those children had something to offer, something brilliant, something the world almost threw away. Leo stepped back from the podium. They laughed at me that night, pointed at my bare feet, my torn clothes. They thought I was nothing. He looked out at the crowd, at the senators, the CEOs, the journalists, the children. But being invisible taught me how to see everything, every pattern, every possibility, every person this world tries to ignore. His final words rang through the ballroom like a bell. Every child out there struggling to survive has a gift this world is too blind to notice. Our job isn't to save them, it's to stop ignoring them. The crowd rose, standing ovation, thunderous, the kind of applause that shakes chandeliers and brings tears to people's eyes. Blake Alexander stood with them, clapping slowly, that unreadable expression finally cracking into something that looked almost like a smile. In the back of the ballroom, a service door creaked open. A small figure slipped through. A girl, maybe 8 or 9, worn clothes, no shoes, hair matted, eyes darting around the room, searching for something. Food. She was looking for food. She'd learned that events like this meant catering, leftovers, scraps that rich people wouldn't miss. She moved along the wall, trying to stay invisible, trying not to be seen. But someone saw her, a young woman in a Foundation polo shirt, a former street kid herself, now a full-time outreach coordinator, spotted the girl immediately. She didn't call security, didn't look away, didn't pretend not to notice. Instead, she walked over slowly, knelt down to eye level, smiled. "Hey," she said softly. "You hungry?" The girl flinched, waited for the catch, the trick, the moment this stranger would reveal herself as just another adult who didn't really care. But the woman just kept smiling. "Come with me," she said, extending her hand. "We've got food, warm clothes, a safe place to sleep tonight." The girl hesitated. "It's okay," the woman added gently. "We've been waiting for you." Slowly, so slowly, the girl reached out. Their hands touched, and somewhere in the ballroom, still standing at the podium, Leo felt something shift, a pattern completing, a circle closing. He didn't see the girl, didn't know she was there, but somehow he knew. The work was just beginning.